What's going on, everybody? Anthony Cervino here at Rotowire.com with an NFL Week 1 injury look ahead. I'm going to go over fantasy football relevant players who may be dealing with an injury, and you need to monitor these players and their injury status heading into this week's slate of games, just in case you need to make a pivot in your fantasy football lineup. Let's start with the Steelers-Falcons. Two big ones here. Steelers running back Jaylen Warren limited in practice this week with a hamstring injury suffered in the preseason, but the full expectation is that Jaylen Warren will play in his normal RB2 spot behind Najee Harris. Now the big one out of this game, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons, one of the top fantasy tight ends off the board. He is dealing with a hamstring injury, and his status for Sunday, per reports, is currently up in the air. If you drafted Pitts, you may not have drafted a number 2 tight end on your fantasy team, which means you need to look on the fantasy football waiver wire in case Pitts does not play. Let's go to the Titans versus the Bears. Another big one here. DeAndre Hopkins, we know he's dealing with the knee injury, suffered in the preseason as well. He missed most of training camp with the knee, so his return on Wednesday was certainly a step in the right direction. There's no guarantee DeAndre Hopkins will play, but this is certainly an injury you want to monitor heading into Sunday. Now, we have another one in this Titans versus Bears matchup. Another wide receiver, another aging veteran wide receiver in Keenan Allen. He was limited during Wednesday's practice. Now, the good thing is that Allen, who suffered a heel injury last month, did return to practice after sustaining the injury. Bears GM Ryan Poles does not believe that the injury will impact Keenan Allen's playing status in week 1. But if Keenan Allen does not play or he is limited, this skyrockets the week 1 fantasy football projections for Rome Odunze. Let's go to the Texans versus the Colts, and another wide receiver impacted here. We know Josh Downs suffered the ankle injury last month. Downs did not practice on Wednesday, and there's a very good chance that Downs does not play. When he initially suffered the injury, we believe that this could force him out of the first few weeks of playing time. Another one in this matchup, it's a kicker, Matt Gay. He is dealing with a hernia injury. He did not practice either. Now, there is an indication that Matt Gay might not play in week 1 because the Colts re-signed Spencer Schrader from the practice squad, which means that Gay's week 1 status is truly in doubt. And Matt Gay is one of the better fantasy kickers, which means he may be on your roster. And this is another situation you may need to look on the fantasy football waiver wire to replace Gay if he is indeed inactive. Let's go to the Jaguars Dolphins with some positive news. And both Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, they do not have an injury designation. After dealing with injuries this summer, they are entering week 1 with a clean injury status. You can lock and load them in your fantasy football lineup against the Jacksonville Jaguars in a game that could have a lot of fantasy football impact and fireworks. Let's go to the Patriots Bengals, another big one with fantasy ramifications. And of course, this surrounds Jamar Chase. Now, Chase is not dealing with an injury, but we know that Jamar Chase has not been practicing because of a contractual situation with the team. The good news is that he did return to practice this week, and that Jamar Chase, although limited, is expected to play on Sunday. Now, there's always a chance, and I have to put this in there, there's always a chance that Jamar Chase changes his mind if a contract is not agreed upon. So while he's practicing, I would prepare for Jamar Chase to sit just in case against the New England Patriots. We also have Joe Burrow. We know dealing with the wrist, that's really not an issue. He was a full participant in practice early this week. Let's go to the Vikings versus the Giants. Now, the big one here, Jordan Addison, dealing with an ankle injury. He was limited during Wednesday's practice. Head coach Kevin O'Connell told the press that Addison moved around, quote, quite well on Wednesday, and they anticipate increasing his workload as the week moves forward, which means there's a good chance that Jordan Addison suits up and plays in week 1 against the New York Giants. Now, here's a little nugget that doesn't impact week 1, but TJ Hockenson, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reports that the Vikings are loosely targeting a week 7 or so return for Hockenson. So how do we handle this, and what does this mean? Some fantasy football leagues, you have an IR spot, you might have drafted TJ Hockenson, threw him in the IR spot, and then picked up another player. However, there are also some fantasy football leagues that may not have drafted TJ Hockenson because he's not going to play half the year. I'm not telling you to go pick up TJ Hockenson now because he is still far away from a return. But with this news, put it in the back of your head. Remember that, you don't want to wait until week 6 to pick up Hockenson because everybody's going to wait until week 6. But maybe if you want to corner the tight end market in your league, like, hey, TJ Hockenson is going to come back week 7, week 8, be proactive. Pick him up a few weeks before his expected return to catch your league mates off guard. So there's a little bit of a TJ Hockenson nugget. Let's go to the next game. Raiders versus the Chargers. First round rookie tight end Brock Bowers. He was limited during Wednesday's practice. He's dealing with a foot injury, but barring any setbacks, the expectation is that Brock Bowers will be a full go in week 1 against the Chargers. Let's go to Seattle versus Denver. Another tight end to talk about, Noah Fant, dealing with the toe. This is another tight end that is fully expected to play in week 1. And remember what I said earlier about Kyle Pitts, that his playing status is indeed up in the air. Noah Fant is probably on a lot of fantasy football waiver wires. I like the matchup against Denver. They have a fairly weak defense after a lot of offseason turnover. If you need to pick up a tight end because you have Kyle Pitts and he doesn't play, Noah Fant is not a bad addition. Noah Fant has big upside this year in the new Grubb offensive system that is expected to sling it. Now, one more note about this football game. Tyler Lockett dealing with the thigh injury. There is no expectation that he misses week 1 or that he's limited. But again, all injuries, we have to put it in there. If there's a setback, Lockett could miss the game, but as of now, he looks like a full go. We're going to close it out with the Rams versus the Lions, and we know the big one here. Puka Nacua, who was dealing with a knee injury this offseason, suffered last month. He practiced fully on Wednesday. Apparently, Puka Nacua looks to have fully recovered from the knee injury suffered in training camp, and he should be a full go in week 1 versus the Detroit Lions. I'm Anthony Cervino for Rotowire.com. We'll see you next week for another fantasy football injury look ahead.